The morning arrives without any announcement, no bells, no excitement, no reason to hurry. Above the city, the Victorian sky is a single flat color, somewhere between gray and slightly more gray. Clouds sit low and heavy, as if they have nowhere else to be. They do not look dramatic. They look tired. Rain has already started, not in a loud or impressive way, but in the quiet, steady way that suggests it plans to stay all day. The rain falls straight down. It does not rush. It does not splash much. It simply continues. Streets below are damp and darkened, their stone surfaces slowly turning shiny. Small puddles form in familiar places, the kind that always appear there and never surprise anyone. Water moves along the gutters at an unhurried pace, carrying nothing of importance with it. The city is awake, but barely. Windows remain dim. Curtains are only half opened, if they are opened at all. A few lamps still glow faintly, forgotten from the night before. Their light looks weak against the morning rain, and no one seems concerned enough to turn them off just yet. There is no sense that today will be special. That feeling is very clear. The air is cool and damp. It settles into clothing and lingers there, making everything feel slightly heavier than it should. Breathing feels normal, but the cold reminds people that warmth will need to be earned slowly over time. Somewhere far away, a cartwheel turns. It creaks once, then not again. The sound disappears into the rain, as if it was never meant to be heard in the first place. Most doors remain closed. No one is standing outside talking about the weather, mostly because there is nothing new to say about it. It is raining. It often rains. This is not news. The street itself looks narrow and quiet, lined with brick buildings that all seem to agree to mind their own business. The bricks are darkened by moisture. Their color deeper than usual. Water gathers along the edges of doorways, dripping slowly from ledges and frames. Nothing moves quickly. A single figure passes at the far end of the street, head lowered, coat pulled tight. Footsteps are soft, absorbed by wet stone. The figure does not stop, does not look around, and certainly does not expect company. Within moments, they are gone. The rain remains. Inside the houses, the day begins in the same way it always does. Not with enthusiasm, but with routine. Floorboards are cold underfoot. Air feels still. Everything looks exactly where it was left the night before, which is comforting in its own dull way. There are no surprises waiting on tables. No letters arrive with urgent news. No clocks suddenly decide to tick louder than usual. Time moves at its normal pace, which is slow enough already. In one home, a kettle is set near a small fire, not yet boiling, not in a hurry. The fire itself takes time to wake up. It crackles softly, as if clearing its throat before doing any real work. The room stays quiet, filled only with the sound of rain tapping against glass. The window shows very little. Rain streaks distort the view outside, turning buildings into soft shapes. The street looks farther away than it really is. Nothing calls for attention. Someone adjusts a shawl. Someone else pauses, standing still for a moment, Listening. There is nothing new to hear, but listening has become habit. Rain, distant water, the faint sound of a house settling into the day. This is a morning without urgency. No one is late for anything important. No meetings wait. No events need preparation. If plans exist at all, they are small and unremarkable. Chores will happen because they always do. Meals will be simple. Time will pass. Outside, rain continues its quiet work. It darkens the street evenly, politely, without flooding or drama. Puddles widen by a small amount. Water gathers along the edges of stones, then moves on. The city does not resist. A horse stands still beneath a small awning farther down the road, its head lowered. The animal does not seem upset by the rain. It has seen worse mornings and expects many more. A faint breath escapes its nose, visible only for a moment before vanishing into the damp air. Nearby, a shop remains closed. Its sign hangs, slightly crooked, unmoving. No customers are expected soon, and the shop does not seem offended by that. It will open when it opens. There is no rush. Rain taps gently on rooftops above, creating a soft, uneven rhythm. Each roof sounds slightly different. Slate produces one tone, wood another. Together, they form a quiet background that does not demand attention. The smell of wet stone and old wood fills the air. It is not unpleasant. It is familiar. It tells the same story it tells every time it rains, which is often. Morning light, light such as it is, does not brighten much. It simply replaces darkness with something slightly less dark. Shadows remain where they were. Corners stay dim. Lamps are still useful. Somewhere inside a house, a door opens and closes carefully. The sound is controlled, as if even noise should not be wasted this early in the day. Steps move from one room to another, slow and deliberate. No one hums. No one whistles. There is nothing to celebrate yet, and nothing to complain about either. The clock on the wall ticks evenly and patiently. It does not hurry the morning along. It simply records it. Each second passes without comment, just as it should. The rain shows no sign of stopping. It does not grow heavier, and it does not fade. It remains exactly the same, which is almost impressive in its lack of ambition. If this day had a personality, it would be very quiet and slightly damp. And so the morning settles in, gray sky above, rain already falling, streets calm and empty, nothing important waiting, nothing unexpected coming. Just the start of another uneventful day. The rain has been falling long enough now that no one remembers when it started. It simply exists. It is part of the morning, like walls or floors, or the feeling of slightly damp air that never fully leaves. Above the streets, the rooftops take most of the rain's attention. Slate tiles, wooden shingles, uneven repairs done years ago, all of them receive the same steady treatment. Drop after drop, without favor or excitement. The sound is gentle, not silence, but close to it. Rain lands on slate with a soft, dull tapping, each drop blending into the next. There is no rhythm anyone could clap to. No pattern worth counting, just a continuous, patient noise that fills the space above the city. Some roofs respond with a slightly sharper sound. Others seem to absorb the rain completely, as if they are too tired to echo it back. Older houses creak faintly, adjusting to the moisture. Though they have done this many times before, water gathers along the edges of rooftops, slowly forming thin lines that creep toward gutters. The gutters accept this water without complaint. They fill, then gently guide it away, drop by drop, down metal pipes and into the streets below. Every now and then, a heavier drip forms. It pauses, grows, and finally falls. The drop hits the stone with a soft plop and disappears immediately, leaving no evidence it was ever there. The sound repeats again and again. Inside the houses, the rain becomes something different. It is no longer individual drops, but a distant, steady presence. It fills rooms without entering them. It sits behind walls, above ceilings, tapping quietly as if reminding everyone that the outside world is still there, doing exactly what it was doing a moment ago. Someone pauses near a window, not to look out, but simply because the sound is there. Rain on the roof does not demand attention, but it gently keeps it anyway. It makes the space feel smaller, safer, more enclosed. The fire crackles once, then settles. Its sound briefly interrupts the rain, but only for a moment. Soon, the rain takes over again, steady and reliable. On one roof, water finds a loose tile and slips beneath it. This does not cause alarm. The house has handled this before. A faint drip begins inside the attic, landing into a small bucket placed there long ago for this exact reason. The bucket waits quietly, doing its job. Drip, pause. Drip. No one rushes to fix it. The bucket will manage for the day. Rain moves differently on each surface. On flat areas, it spreads and thins. On angled tiles, it runs in narrow streams, tracing paths worn smooth by years of repetition. These paths are well practiced. They do not wander. The city listens, even if no one is actively listening. From one end of the street to the other, rooftops whisper the same message. Nothing urgent is happening. Nothing needs immediate attention. The day can move at its own slow pace. In a larger building, rain sounds deeper, heavier, as it strikes wider surfaces. The echo lingers slightly longer, though it never becomes loud. It is not trying to be noticed. Chimneys stand still, darkened by moisture. Smoke rises weakly from a few of them, bending slightly in the damp air before fading. The rain does not seem bothered by the smoke. It falls straight through it, unchanged. Somewhere nearby, a bird shifts on a ledge, feathers puffed against the cold. The rain touches it lightly. The bird does not fly away. It has decided to wait. Inside another home, someone moves a chair closer to the table. The scrape is soft and brief. Once it stops, the rain fills the space again, as if reclaiming it. The sound of rain on rooftops does something strange to time. Minutes stretch. Seconds lose their sharp edges. The day does not seem eager to move forward, and no one encourages it to. The rooftops themselves seem patient. They have carried rain like this through many seasons. They know it will pass eventually, but they are in no hurry to see it go. A loose shutter taps once in the wind, then settles. The rain continues uninterrupted. From far above, water travels downward in long, quiet journeys, from roof to gutter, from gutter to pipe, from pipe to street, from street to somewhere, unseen. Each drop follows the same path others have taken before and will take again. Nothing new is learned in this process. That is part of its comfort. The rain sound is never exactly the same, but it is close enough that no one notices the difference. Slight changes pass unnoticed, absorbed into the whole. In one room, someone pauses mid-task, hands resting on a table, not because of tiredness, but because the rain has made stopping feel acceptable. After a moment, the task continues unaltered. Outside, rooftops grow darker as they remain wet. Water beads and slides, reflecting faint light from the gray sky. The city looks soft around the edges, as if gently blurred. Rain does not argue with the buildings. It works with them. It fits into corners, follows lines, respects gravity. It does not try to impress. The sound remains steady, persistent, calm. If there is humor in it, it is quiet and dry, much like the rest of the day. The rain falls with complete seriousness, fully committed to doing absolutely nothing interesting. It does not thunder. It does not rush. It simply continues. And beneath the rooftops, beneath the steady tapping and dripping, the city settles deeper into its uneventful rhythm. Tasks move forward slowly. Thoughts wander gently. The morning stretches itself comfortably. The rain on the rooftops carries on, patient and unbothered, as if it has nowhere else to be. And for now, neither does anyone else. The street does not try to impress anyone. It never has. It is narrow, straight enough, and lined on both sides with brick houses that all seem to agree on one thing: standing quietly is good enough. The bricks are darkened by rain, their usual reddish tone muted into something closer to brown. Each house looks very similar to the next, as if they were built from the same careful thought and then left alone. Rain settles into every crack and line. The street stones shine softly, not polished, just wet. Water gathers where it always does, along the edges and between uneven stones. No one attempts to fix this. The puddles belong here now. Windows face the street in calm rows. Most of them are fogged from the inside, clouded by warm air meeting the cold rain outside. Shapes move faintly behind the glass, but nothing clear enough to invite attention. Curtains hang still, some pulled halfway, some fully closed, some forgotten entirely. The street lamps remain lit, even though it is technically morning. Their yellow glow looks weak against the gray sky, but they stay on anyway. Turning them off feels unnecessary. They do not mind being useful a little longer. No carts pass through at this hour. No groups of people gather to talk. Footsteps are rare, and when they do appear, they are careful and brief. The street seems to prefer being left alone. Rain lands quietly on doorsteps, on iron railings, on the tops of low walls. Everything accepts it without resistance. Nothing shines brighter. Nothing tries to escape it. Each house has a door that opens onto the street, solid and plain. Most are painted in dark colors, now darker still from moisture. Water beads along the edges and drips slowly to the ground. The sound is soft and easily lost beneath the steady rain. A small sign hangs above one doorway, gently tilted. It does not swing. The rain has weighed it down just enough to keep it still. It has learned patience. The street smells faintly of wet stone and old brick. It is not a bad smell. It simply exists like the street itself, familiar and unchanged. A cat sits beneath a short overhang near the corner, tucked in tightly. It watches the rain with clear disinterest. The cat does not plan to move until the rain makes a better offer. Iron railings line a few of the houses, their tops dotted with small beads of water. Drops form, hesitate, then fall. No one counts them. They fall when ready. From one window, a dim light flickers slightly, then steadies. A lamp has been adjusted inside, but the street notices only a mild change in glow. It is not enough to change the mood. The buildings lean toward each other just a little, as if sharing the weight of the damp day. Years of rain have passed between them, and they seem to understand how to handle it together. Down the length of the street, the view does not change much. Same bricks, same doors, same windows. The repetition is calming, like a pattern that requires no thought. The rain continues to soften everything. Edges look less sharp. Colors fade slightly. The street appears older in this weather, though it has always been old enough. A shutter rests half open on one house, unmoving. It does not bang or rattle. It behaves itself. The rain appreciates that. Somewhere behind one of the windows, a chair scrapes softly against the floor. The sound does not escape far. The street barely notices before the rain takes over again. There is no music, no shouting, no urgent voices if anyone speaks at all. It is indoors and quietly. The street is not interested in conversation today. A single footprint appears briefly in the wet stone, then begins to fade as rain fills it in. Soon it is gone, as if no one had passed through it all. Time feels slower here. Not because it actually is, but because nothing pushes it along. Without activity, minutes stretch comfortably. The street does not mind waiting. A drain near the center of the road carries water away in a thin, steady stream. It does not overflow. It does not clog. It simply works unnoticed and reliable. The houses have seen many days like this. Rainy mornings, quiet hours, uneventful stretches of time. If they could speak, they would probably say this is normal and nothing to worry about. At one end of the street, the road bends slightly, just enough to hide what comes next. That is fine. There is no need to see farther today. The street lamps reflect faintly in the wet stone below them, long yellow shapes broken by uneven ground. The reflections tremble slightly with each drop of rain, then settle again. The rain does not hurry people along, but it discourages lingering. Anyone who passes through does so with purpose, even if that purpose is small, fetching something, going nowhere important. The doors remain closed, not locked tightly, just closed enough. Inside, warmth stays in. Outside, the rain stays out. Everyone seems satisfied with this arrangement. A small piece of paper clings to the street near the curb, soaked and flattened. It no longer carries any message. The rain has taken care of that. The sky above the street remains a solid gray, offering no hint of change. It does not brighten. It does not darken much either. It holds steady, much like everything else. The street feels calm, but not peaceful in a dramatic way. More like settled, content with being overlooked. If the street had thoughts, they would be slow ones, practical ones. Thoughts about standing, about waiting, about letting the rain pass without comment. And so the modest Victorian street remains exactly as it is. Narrow, quiet, wet, unbothered. No movement worth in, no moment worth remembering. Just a simple street doing nothing at all and doing it very well. Inside the house, the world becomes smaller, the door closes, and the sound of rain softens at once. It does not disappear, but it moves farther away, turning into a distant, steady murmur. The house does not block the rain completely. It only asks it to be quieter. The air inside is cool. Not sharply cold, just cold enough to be noticed. The kind of cold that has been sitting there since the night before, waiting patiently. It settles in corners and along the floor, especially near the walls. It does not rush out when the door closes. It prefers to stay. The room is quiet. Not the awkward kind of quiet, just the normal kind, the kind that exists when nothing is trying to happen. Furniture stands where it always does. A plain wooden table near the center of the room. A few sturdy chairs around it. None of them match perfectly, but they are close enough that no one complains. The table shows marks from years of use. Scratches, small dents, nothing decorative, just proof that it has been useful. There is no extra furniture. No pieces added for comfort or beauty. Everything here has a purpose, and once that purpose is fulfilled, it stops trying. The floor is wooden, worn smooth in the places where feet pass most often. It creaks slightly when stepped on, but not loudly. The house is not trying to tell stories. It is just reacting. A small fireplace sits against one wall. It is not impressive. It does not stretch high or draw attention. A few pieces of coal rest nearby, waiting to be used later. For now, the fireplace is quiet, offering no warmth yet, and making no promises. The walls are bare, no paintings, no decorations, no framed memories, just plain surfaces, slightly uneven, showing their age in subtle ways. A crack runs gently from the ceiling toward the corner, stopping halfway down as if it lost interest. Light enters the room through a single window. The glass is thick and slightly wavy, bending the outside world into softer shapes. Rain slides slowly down it, leaving long streaks that blur everything beyond. The light itself is gray and dim, but it is enough. A simple curtain hangs beside the window. It is clean, but faded. It moves just slightly when the air shifts, which is rare. Most of the time, it stays perfectly still. The silence inside the house feels heavier than the silence outside. It is the kind of silence that fills the room completely, resting on furniture, corners, and floorboards. It does not echo. It does not bounce. It simply stays. There is no clock ticking loudly. If a clock exists at all, it keeps its sound to itself. Time moves quietly here. Without reminders, a cupboard stands against the far wall. Its doors are closed. Inside are plates, cups, and utensils, all plain and practical. Nothing matches exactly. Nothing shines. They are clean, which is enough. There is no decoration to distract the eye. No patterns to follow. No colors to admire. The room seems content with being simple, as if complexity would only get in the way. A chair is pushed slightly away from the table, not because someone just stood up, but because it was left that way last night. No one felt the need to fix it. The chair does not mind. The cold air lingers near the floor. It wraps around ankles gently, reminding anyone standing there that warmth must be created, not expected. The house has learned this lesson well. From somewhere deeper inside, the faint sound of water dripping can be heard. It is slow and regular. A leak, perhaps, or simply water finding its way where it always does. The sound is not urgent enough to demand attention. The ceiling is low, not uncomfortably low, just low enough to make the space feel contained. The house does not want thoughts wandering too far upward. Every surface in the room looks slightly dull. Not dirty, just untouched by shine. Light lands on them and stops. It does not reflect back brightly. It rests. The air smells faintly of damp wood and old fabric. It is a smell that has built up over time, layer by layer. It does not announce itself. It only exists if noticed. There is no sense of luxury here. No softness meant to impress. Comfort, if it exists, comes from familiarity, not design. Everything is exactly where it has always been. A small shelf holds a few everyday items, a folded cloth, a candle. Partly used, a matchbox, each thing placed with care, not style. They wait quietly. The house seems to listen to itself. The walls hold sound gently. A movement in one corner does not travel far. Silence returns quickly, as if eager. From outside, the rain continues, but the house does not react. It has experienced this many times. The rain can do what it likes. The house will remain. The window frame feels cold to the touch. Moisture gathers at its edges, forming tiny beads. They stay there, unmoving, as if unsure where to go next. No voices fill the space. If anyone speaks, it would feel out of place. Words would disturb the balance. The house prefers sounds that are unplanned. The simplicity of the room leaves little for the eye to do. With nothing to examine, attention drifts. Thoughts slow down. The mind follows the room's lead. If humor exists here, it is quiet. The kind that comes from knowing this room will look exactly the same tomorrow. And the day after that, and long after anyone stops thinking about it, the house does not try to impress visitors, mostly because it does not expect any. It exists for use, not admiration. The cold air remains. The furniture stays still. The silence continues its work. Inside this simple Victorian home, nothing demands attention and nothing receives it. And in a way, that is the whole point. Morning does not arrive with enthusiasm. It arrives because it has to. There is no alarm to announce it. No bell rings with importance. The servant wakes because the body decides it is time, or because the room has grown just cold enough to make staying in bed feel unwise. The bed itself offers little comfort anyway. It is narrow, firm, and familiar. It has never promised luxury, and it keeps that promise very well. The servant sits up slowly, not dramatically, just enough to begin the day. The movement is careful, practiced, and quiet. There is no stretching for pleasure, only for function. Muscles respond without complaint. They have done this before. Many times. The room remains dim. Light seeps in reluctantly through a small window filtered by rain and cloud. The gray glow is enough to see shapes, but not details. That is fine. Details are not needed for routine. Clothing waits nearby, folded simply. Nothing new, nothing special. The fabric is worn soft from years of use. It is dressed in layers, not for style, but for warmth. Each piece goes on in the same order, without thought. A shirt first, then another layer. Buttons fastened carefully, one by one. None of them shine. Some are slightly loose. All of them do their job well enough. There is no mirror worth looking into. Even if there were, there would be little reason to use it. Appearance does not change much from day to day. Today will look like yesterday. Yesterday looked like the day before that. Shoes are pulled on next. Sturdy. Practical. Not particularly comfortable, but not painful either. They have shaped themselves to these feet over time. The floor is cold beneath them, which helps wake the body the rest of the way. The servant pauses for a moment, not to think, but simply because the routine allows it. A breath is taken. The air feels damp and cool, settling easily into the lungs. There is no conversation, no greeting exchanged. No one asks how the servant slept, mostly because no one expects an interesting answer. Sleep was sleep. The night passed. That is all. Hands move automatically now. A shawl is adjusted. Sleeves are straightened. Everything is checked once, quickly, and then forgotten. The door opens quietly. Not because silence is demanded, but because loudness would feel unnecessary. The house still feels asleep in places. The servant moves through it with respect, as if not to wake it fully. Footsteps are soft. Floorboards respond with gentle creaks, each one familiar. The servant knows where to step to avoid louder sounds, though even the louder sounds are not truly loud. The house has learned to keep its voice down. The kitchen waits, unchanged. Cold air rests heavily there, especially near the stone floor. The servant does not react to it. Cold is expected. Complaining would change nothing. The fire is checked next. Ashes from the night before sit quietly, doing nothing. New coal is added slowly. There is no rush to make warmth appear instantly. Warmth arrives when it is ready. A kettle is set nearby, not yet boiling. Not yet warm. It sits patiently like everything else. The servant's hands move from task to task without instruction. These motions have been practiced so often that they do not require attention. Muscle memory takes over, freeing the mind to remain mostly empty. There is no planning for the day. No list is made. The work is already known. It will unfold in the same order it always does. Thinking ahead is unnecessary. The rain outside is noticed only briefly through the window. It falls steadily, unchanged. The servant does not sigh at it or smile at it. Rain is just another condition like cold or time. A cloth is picked up. A surface is wiped. Dust and moisture are removed quietly. The task is not satisfying, but it is effective. The surface looks the same as it did yesterday, which is the goal. There is no conversation in the kitchen. Even if someone else is nearby, words feel optional. Silence works just fine. The servant moves carefully, not to avoid mistakes, but because speed is not required. Nothing will improve if done faster. Doing it properly is enough At some point, the fire begins to respond. A faint warmth appears, slow and gentle. The servant notices it only because the cold eases slightly. There is no celebration. The kettle warms gradually. Steam does not rise yet. That will come later. For now, waiting is part of the work. A simple breakfast may be prepared, or maybe not yet. The timing depends on the household, but the servant does not decide. Decisions belong elsewhere. The servant simply follows the shape of the morning. Hands are washed in cool water. The water feels sharp for a moment, then normal. A towel dries them. The towel is rough, but reliable. The servant pauses briefly by the window again. Not to look out for anything specific, just to stand there. Rain streaks slide down the glass. The world outside looks blurred and distant, like something happening far away, even though it is right there. There is no emotion attached to this moment. No sadness. No joy. Just presence. The servant turns away and continues. Dishes are checked. Utensils counted quickly. Everything is where it should be. Nothing has gone missing overnight, which is always a relief, even if it was expected. Time passes quietly during these motions. Minutes drift by unnoticed. The servant does not mark them. There is no reason to. The routine continues because it must, not because it wants to. And yet there is something steady about it. Predictable. Almost comforting if one were to think about it long enough. But thinking is not required. The servant's face remains calm. Not blank, just neutral. Expressions are saved for other moments, perhaps later, perhaps not at all. If there is humor in this routine, it is subtle. The same motions, the same steps, the same morning repeated again and again. The body knows the routine so well that the mind barely needs to attend. The day begins without thought. And that is exactly how it is meant to begin. Nothing has gone wrong. Nothing exciting has happened. The servant's morning routine continues, quietly setting the tone for a day that plans to do absolutely nothing memorable. The kitchen does not greet the morning. It simply waits for it. The room is still when the servant enters, as if it has been holding its breath overnight. Cold air rests heavily near the floor, clinging to stone and settling into corners. The walls feel close, not crowded, just present. Everything inside the kitchen is exactly where it was left, and that feels correct. Silence fills the space before anything else does. The servant stands for a brief moment, not thinking, not listening for instructions, just allowing the room to be what it is. There is no need to rush. The kitchen has nowhere to go. The fire comes first. It always does. The hearth is dark and quiet, ashes resting where yesterday ended. The servant bends slightly, careful and practiced, and arranges fresh coal. Each piece is placed without sound, or as little sound as possible. Coal knocks gently against coal, a soft, dull noise. Nothing sharp. A match is struck. The small flare of light appears, quick and brief, then disappears into the hearth. The fire does not respond immediately. It never does. It takes its time, considering the request. While waiting, the servant moves on. The table is wiped slowly. The cloth is damp and cool in the hand. It moves across the wood in long, even strokes. The table does not shine afterward. It simply looks clean, which is enough. No one expects more from it. Chairs are checked next. One is pushed in slightly. Another remains where it is. The servant does not correct it. Perfection is unnecessary. order is flexible. The kettle is lifted and filled with water. The water is cold, straight from the pump, and it makes the servant's fingers stiff for a moment. The kettle is heavier than it looks, but not unmanageable. It is set near the fire, close enough to warm when the fire finally decides to cooperate. The sound of rain reaches the kitchen faintly through the walls. It is softer here, filtered, and distant. It becomes part of the background, like a memory that keeps repeating itself. Cupboard doors open quietly. Plates are taken out one by one. They do not clink loudly. The servant makes sure of that. Each plate is plain, slightly chipped in places, but clean. They are placed neatly, though no one will admire the arrangement. Utensils follow. Knives, forks, spoons. All simple, all familiar. They make a soft, metallic sound when set down, then go quiet again. There is no conversation, no humming, no clearing of the throat, just to break the silence. The servant allows the silence to remain intact. It feels easier that way. The fire begins to respond at last. A small crackle sounds, barely noticeable. The servant does not turn to look. Fires do better when ignored slightly. A pot is set out empty for now. Ingredients will come later if needed. The servant does not plan ahead. Planning is for people with choices. The kitchen smells faintly of damp stone, old wood, and coal dust. It is not unpleasant, just steady. The smell does not change much, no matter the day. That reliability is useful. The floor is swept next. The broom moves slowly, gathering dust and small bits of debris. The motion is steady and unhurried. The servant knows how much pressure to use. Too much would make noise. Too little would be pointless. The collected dust is removed without ceremony. No one watches. No one thanks the broom. The kitchen simply becomes slightly cleaner. The fire crackles again, this time with more confidence. A small warmth begins to spread, not enough to be comforting, but enough to be noticed. The servant registers it without comment. The kettle remains quiet. It is not ready yet. Steam has not appeared. That is fine. Mornings take time. A cloth is rinsed in cold water and wrung out carefully. Drops fall back into the basin with soft taps. The sound blends into the room and disappears. Shelves are checked. Everything is in its place. Nothing is missing. Nothing new has appeared. The servant finds this reassuring, even if only briefly. The window is glanced at again. Rain streaks continue their slow paths downward. The outside world looks blurred and distant, like something happening to someone else. The servant does not linger. The kitchen remains dim. Light from the window is gray and thin. It does not brighten corners fully. Shadows stay where they are, unmoved. The servant moves from task to task without pause, but also without speed. There is a rhythm to it, slow and even. It is not a rhythm meant to be enjoyed, just followed. The fire grows stronger now. A bit of warmth reaches the servant's hands when they pass near it. The change is small, but noticeable. The kitchen feels slightly less unwelcoming. A pot is filled with water. Another is left empty. Decisions are made quietly and quickly, without thought. Habit decides most things. The kettle begins to whisper softly. Not boiling, just warming. A faint sound like a breath being taken. The servant notices and moves on. No one enters the kitchen. No one calls out from another room. The house allows this moment of quiet work to continue uninterrupted. The servant adjusts a sleeve, straightens a collar. These small actions are done automatically without checking reflection or result. Time moves forward, though it does not announce itself. The kitchen slowly shifts from night ready to day ready. The change is subtle. If someone were to walk in later, they would not notice anything specific. They would simply find the kitchen prepared. The silence is not empty. It is full of small sounds that do not compete with each other. The soft scrape of wood, the faint crackle of fire, the distant rain. Together, they form something steady and calm. The servant stands still for a moment, hands resting lightly on the table. Not because there is nothing to do, but because the pause fits naturally here. After a breath or two, movement resumes. Everything is ready enough. The kitchen does not look impressive. It does not smell particularly inviting, but it is prepared, and that is its purpose. The servant steps back slightly, surveying the room without really seeing it. Experience says it is fine. Nothing else needs immediate attention. Silence returns to full strength. The kitchen settles again, warmer now, but still quiet. Preparing the kitchen has been done carefully, thoroughly, and without sound, and that, for this kind of morning, is more than sufficient. The window is not meant to be stared at for long. But it ends up happening anyway. The servant pauses near the kitchen window. Not for any clear reason. The hands are clean for the moment. The fire is behaving. The kettle is warming at its own slow pace. Nothing urgently needs doing. So the eyes drift toward the glass. Rain slides down the window in thin, uneven lines. Some drops race each other. Some move slowly, as if unsure where they are going. Others stop halfway, clinging to the glass until another drop bumps into them and pushes them along. It is not exciting, but it is strangely difficult to look away from. Outside, the street looks softer through the rain. Edges blur. Straight lines bend slightly. Brick walls lose their sharpness. Everything feels farther away than it really is. The servant does not press close to the glass. That would leave marks, and marks invite comments later. Instead, they stand just far enough back to observe without touching. The view is familiar, yet never exactly the same. A carriage passes slowly, wheels cutting through shallow puddles. The sound reaches the window as a dull splash, softened by distance and rain. The servant watches until it disappears, not wondering where it is going. Somewhere normal. Somewhere necessary. A man hurries past, coat pulled tight, head down. He moves like someone who wants the rain to finish personally for him. It does not. The rain keeps going uninterested. The servant notices how the light changes when clouds shift. It is never bright, but sometimes it becomes less dull. Gray turns into a slightly lighter gray, then back again. It feels like the sky is making small decisions that do not matter much. Raindrops tap the glass gently. The sound is uneven, never forming a steady rhythm. It would be annoying if it were louder. As it is, it blends into the background easily. The servant's reflection appears faintly in the glass. Not clear enough to study, just a shape standing still. That is enough. A small crack in the window frame lets in cold air. The servant feels it against the side of the face. It is sharp for a moment, then fades as the body adjusts. Winter air always finds its way inside, no matter how carefully doors and windows are made. Across the street, a window opens briefly. Someone shakes out a cloth or rug. Dust mixes with rain and disappears immediately. The window closes again. That small action feels like the most dramatic event of the morning so far. The servant watches water gather along the edge of the roof opposite. It builds slowly, then spills over in a thin stream. It falls straight down, breaking into droplets before hitting the ground. This repeats over and over without variation. The world seems quieter when watched through glass. Sounds feel distant even when they are not. The rain looks calm, even though it soaks everything it touches. The servant shifts weight from one foot to the other. Standing still too long makes the body stiff. Movement, even small, keeps the cold away. The kettle whispers again behind them. A reminder that time is passing, even if nothing important is happening. Outside, a child runs past, laughing briefly before being pulled along by an adult. The laugh is short-lived, swallowed by rain and distance. The servant watches them go, feeling neither envy nor irritation. Just acknowledgement. Puddles grow larger near the curb. Each drop makes a small circle that expands and disappears into another. The patterns overlap endlessly, creating designs no one will ever remember. The servant notices how rain makes everything honest. There is no dust hiding in corners, no dry ground pretending to be clean. Everything is either wet or becoming wet. A cat appears under a doorway awning, fur-puffed and irritated. It looks out at the rain with clear disappointment. After a moment, it retreats back into shelter. The servant almost smiles, but not quite. The window glass is cool when the servant finally rests fingertips against it, just briefly. The cold seeps in quickly. The hand pulls away without thought. That was enough contact. Clouds move slowly overhead. Their movement is only noticeable because the light shifts again. The servant does not try to follow shapes or imagine patterns. Clouds do not need stories today. The rain does not fall harder. It does not stop. It simply continues, steady and patient. The kind of rain that could last all day without tiring. For a moment, the servant wonders what the house would sound like without rain, then decides the question is unnecessary. This is the day that exists. A cart creaks past, pulled by a tired horse. The horse's hooves splash through water without enthusiasm. Neither horse nor cart seems surprised by the weather. They accept it the way everyone else does. The servant steps back from the window. The room feels warmer than it did earlier, though it is still far from warm. The fire has made progress. Looking through the window has not changed anything. No problem solved. No plans made. But it has filled a small space of time, and that is sometimes enough. The servant wipes a bit of condensation from the glass with a cloth, clearing a narrow view. Almost immediately, the fog returns. The window prefers its blur. Rain continues its quiet work outside. Roofs glisten. Stone darkens. Wood swells slightly. The world adjusts itself without asking permission. The servant gives the window one last glance, then turns away. There are tasks waiting, small and ordinary. The rain will still be there later, doing exactly the same thing. Behind the servant, the window keeps watching the street. Rain keeps falling, and the day moves forward slowly, without effort, exactly as it intends to. Morning does not hurry. It stretches itself out, comfortable in its own dullness. The servant becomes aware of time not by clocks, but by repetition. The same steps taken again. The same rooms passed through more than once. Nothing new announces itself. The house simply continues to exist. The fire needs attention again. Not urgently, just enough to keep it alive. A piece of coal is added. It settles in with a soft sound, sending a brief spark upward. The servant watches only long enough to be sure it will behave. The kettle has finished its work. It rests quietly now, no longer whispering. Water is poured where needed. Steam rises, then disappears into the air without ceremony. No one comments on it. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaks. The sound travels down the hallway, then fades. The servant does not react. Houses make noises. That is one of their habits. Morning light remains gray and thin. It does not improve. It does not worsen. It simply stays. The servant stops, expecting change, and finds that easier. Tasks repeat themselves in a slow loop. A surface wiped again, though it was wiped earlier. A cloth rinsed, though it is barely dirty. These actions are not pointless. They are anchors, keeping the hours from drifting too far apart. The rain continues, unnoticed most of the time. Only when a heavier drop strikes the window does it briefly demand attention. Then it settles back into the background. The servant passes through the hallway, steps quiet on worn boards. The walls hold old smells, polish, damp wool, faint traces of smoke. None of them stand out anymore. They are part of the house's memory. A door is opened, then closed again. The room inside remains unused for now. The servant does not linger. Unused rooms have their own patience. The body begins to feel the morning's length. Not tired exactly, just aware. Shoulders shift. Hands flex slightly. Movement keeps stiffness from settling in too deeply. Breakfast things are arranged and rearranged. Plates moved a finger's width. Cups turned so handles face the same direction. These details are small enough to matter only to the servant. There is a sense that something should happen soon. But nothing does. The feeling fades on its own. Outside, the street stays quiet. The rain discourages unnecessary travel. Only those who must go out do so. Everyone else waits. The servant pauses near the window again, though only briefly this time. The view has not changed. That is oddly comforting. A draft slips through the corridor, cold and sharp. The servant pulls a shawl tighter, the fabric familiar against the neck. Winter mornings are good at reminding people where they are. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticks. It is faint but persistent. Each sound marks time passing, though the servant does not count. Counting would make the hours feel longer. The fire settles into a steady state. It no longer demands attention. The servant appreciates that quietly. A cupboard is checked. Supplies are sufficient, not plentiful, but enough. Enough is the house's favorite condition. The servant takes a moment to stand still in the kitchen doorway. From here, several rooms are visible at once. All of them quiet, all of them waiting. The rain's rhythm does not change. It does not need encouragement. It falls because it is supposed to. Morning continues. The servant moves slowly through another round of tasks. The floor is checked. The table is checked. The door latch is tested once, just to be sure. These actions feel automatic, like breathing. There is no conversation. No voices carry through the house. Silence becomes familiar enough to stop feeling empty. The light shifts slightly again. Not brighter, not darker. Just different enough to notice if someone is paying attention. The servant notices, then moves on. Time stretches further. The hours do not stack neatly. They spread out, thin and long, filling the space between one task and the next. A small ache forms in the lower back. The servant adjusts posture, easing it. Pain is ignored when possible, managed when necessary. The rain makes the house feel smaller, more contained. Everything important is inside these walls for now. The outside world can wait. The servant rinses hands in cool water. The sensation is sharp, then dulls. Hands are dried carefully, sleeves kept out of the way. A bird lands briefly on the windowsill, feathers puffed against the cold. It looks in, then flies off again, deciding the inside is not meant for it. The servant notices this with mild interest. Morning refuses to end quickly. It lingers, filling the house with its quiet weight. The servant begins to recognize the feeling of waiting without knowing what for. It is not unpleasant, just strange. Another log is added to the fire, though it does not truly need it yet. Better to prepare than to be cold later. The rain shows no sign of stopping. The servant stops checking. At some point, the servant realizes that much of the morning has already passed. The realization comes without surprise. Nothing important has happened. And that, in its own way, feels like success. The long morning hours continue to stretch ahead, calm and uneventful, carrying the day forward one quiet moment at a time. The streets look abandoned, but they are not. They are simply resting. The servant notices this while passing near the front window, catching a wider view of the road outside. It feels later now, though the light does not confirm it. Morning still clings to the world, stretched thin by clouds and rain. No crowds form. No voices rise. No sudden movement pulls the eye. The street lies open and quiet, washed clean by steady rainfall. Stones shine darkly, reflecting pale shapes that could almost be mistaken for light. Almost a lamppost stands useless in daylight, wet and slightly crooked. Water runs down its length in narrow paths, collecting at the base before disappearing into the gutter. It has nothing to do and seems fine with that. The servant lingers just long enough to take it in. Usually, by this hour, there would be some movement. A shopkeeper opening shutters. A delivery cart rattling by. Someone late for somewhere important. Today offers none of that. The rain has negotiated a truce with the street. Nothing will happen unless it absolutely must. A single set of footprints marks the wet ground near the corner. They lead nowhere visible, fading quickly as rain fills them in. Whoever made them is already forgotten by the street. The servant watches as water runs along the gutter in a slow, uneven stream. Bits of straw and leaves drift along, then get caught, then break free again. Even debris seems undecided. A door across the way opens briefly. A woman steps out, looks up at the sky with mild disappointment, and steps back inside. The door closes softly. The street returns to stillness. Rain makes buildings look older. Brick darkens. Wood swells. Paint dulls. The servant thinks the street looks more honest this way, stripped of any effort to appear lively. A horse stands tied near a post farther down the road, head lowered. Its coat is damp, mane plastered against its neck. It shifts its weight slightly, unimpressed by the weather. The servant watches it for a moment, then looks away. Sound travels strangely in the rain. A distant cart wheel squeaks somewhere far off, echoing faintly before vanishing. It sounds lonelier than it probably is. The servant notices how the rain smooths everything. Sharp edges soften. Movement slows. Even time seems to drag its feet. A newspaper lies abandoned near the curb, soaked and unreadable. Ink has bled into the paper, turning words into shapes that no longer mean anything. The servant imagines someone dropped it in a hurry, then decided it was not worth retrieving. No one argues with the rain. Windows remain shut. Curtains stay drawn. The street feels watched, but not engaged with. Everyone is inside, listening to the same sound, waiting for the same improvement that may not come. The servant steps back slightly, careful not to stand too close to the glass. Looking too long feels like tempting boredom into becoming something heavier. Inside the house, the air feels warmer by comparison. Outside feels far away, even though it is only a few steps beyond the door. The servant passes through the hallway again. But the image of the empty street lingers. It feels strange how peaceful it looks and how completely uninterested it is in being noticed. Rain continues to fall at the same steady pace. It does not splash dramatically. It does not pour. It simply persists. Another glance through the window shows no change. The horse is gone now, led away quietly at some point without announcement. The footprints have vanished. The street has erased evidence of activity. The servant realizes that the street is doing what the house is doing. Waiting, existing, keeping itself together until the day decides what comes next. A faint bell rings somewhere far off, muffled by rain and distance. It might be from a shop or a church or something else entirely. The sound fades before the servant can decide. The street does not respond. Puddles deepen slightly. Reflections wobble when raindrops strike them. The world outside feels soft, like it could be pressed into a different shape if someone tried. No one does. The servant notices is not uncomfortable. It is not lonely exactly. It feels intentional, as if the street has chosen this quiet. A cart finally appears at the far end, moving slowly, wheels careful on wet stone. It travels a short distance, then turns off, leaving the street empty once more. Its appearance feels more like a reminder than an event. The servant exhales softly, not realizing they had been holding their breath. Watching stillness for too long can do that. Inside, a clock ticks on, stubborn and regular. Outside, time feels less organized. The servant steps away from the window, letting the curtain fall back into place. The street disappears again, hidden but unchanged. The rain keeps falling. The buildings keep standing. The road keeps waiting. Nothing calls out. Nothing demands attention. The streets remain empty, not because something is wrong, but because today does not require them to be full. And for now, that is enough. Midday arrives quietly, almost embarrassed to be noticed. If no one were paying attention, it might slip by unnoticed entirely. The servant senses it more than sees it. The light changes just enough to suggest that morning has given up its hold. Not brighter, not warmer, just slightly different, like a room where someone has moved a chair. The clock confirms it eventually. Its steady ticking reaches a certain point, and the hands settle into a position that suggests noon or something close to it. The servant does not celebrate this. Midday today offers nothing special. The rain continues loyal and unchanging. It does not pause for the hour. It does not acknowledge time at all. Inside the house, the air feels settled now. The fire has found its rhythm. The rooms are no longer waking up. They are simply awake, which is a less demanding state. The servant moves through familiar motions again, a cloth folded neatly, a cup rinsed and set aside. A small spill wiped before it can become someone else's problem. These tasks do not announce themselves. They wait patiently to be done. There is no lunch bell ringing dramatically. No guests arriving unexpectedly. No sense of urgency drifting down the halls. Midday has arrived alone. The servant pauses briefly in the kitchen doorway, listening. The house sounds the same as it did an hour ago and the hour before that. This consistency feels intentional, as if the house has decided not to surprise anyone today. Outside, the street remains quiet, even at this hour, when life usually stirs a little. The rain keeps things subdued. The servant catches a glimpse through the window. Nothing new. No reason to look longer. Hunger appears gently, without complaint. The servant acknowledges it, then ignores it for now. Meals happen when they happen. The body understands this arrangement, even if it does not prefer it. A loaf of bread is checked. Still there. A bit dry, but acceptable. Everything today is acceptable, nothing more. The servant pours water into a basin, washes hands carefully. The water is cold, but no colder than expected. Winter does not need reminders. Midday light presses against the windows, thin and pale. It does not push its way in. It simply rests there, waiting for permission it will not receive. Somewhere nearby, a door closes softly. Not slammed. Not rushed. Just closed. The servant does not investigate. The sound carries no importance. The rain makes the hours feel heavier, as if time itself has absorbed moisture and become slower. The servant moves accordingly without thinking about it. A small task presents itself, straightening a stack of papers that no one will read today. The servant aligns the edges carefully. The action feels oddly satisfying, even if the result goes unnoticed. Midday usually brings noise. Today, it brings a deeper quiet, the kind that settles into the bones if allowed. The servant keeps moving to avoid that. A chair is repositioned slightly closer to the wall. It will make walking through the room easier later. These small adjustments feel like accomplishments, even if no one agrees. The fire crackles once, briefly louder than before. The servant glances at it, then looks away. Fires enjoy attention, but too much can make them unpredictable. The smell of damp wool drifts in faintly, likely from coats hung nearby. The servant barely notices. Familiar smells fade quickly. Outside, the rain does something almost interesting. It slows for a few moments. Drops become thinner, more spaced out. The servant notices this and waits, curious despite themselves. Then the rain resumes its original pace, as if the pause never happened. The servant exhales softly. Expecting change was unnecessary. Midday continues without offering entertainment. The servant completes another round of checks. Door secure. Surfaces clean. Supplies untouched. Everything remains in its proper, uneventful state. A clock chimes somewhere in the house. The sound is muffled, but clear enough to count. 12. The servant does not react. Noon has been officially announced, but no one attends the announcement. The sound fades, and the house returns to its usual quiet. The servant leans briefly against the edge of the table, shifting weight from one foot to the other. Standing all morning leaves its mark. The pause is short, careful not to look like rest. Outside, A single person hurries past, head lowered, coat pulled tight. They move quickly, as if trying to outrun the weather or the day itself. The servant watches them disappear, then turns away. Midday feels like a held breath. Not tense, just suspended. The servant pours a small cup of tea, more out of habit than desire. The warmth is appreciated, even if the taste is ordinary. The cup is held carefully, fingers wrapped around it, absorbing heat slowly. No conversation accompanies the moment. Tea does not require words. After a few sips, the cup is set aside. The servant does not finish it. There is no rule saying it must be finished. The rain darkens the window again as another cloud passes. Light dims slightly. Midday looks suspiciously like morning all over again. The servant adjusts a shawl, smooths a sleeve. Clothing feels heavier today, damp, air settling into fabric. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings faintly. Not close enough to matter. The servant does not try to identify it. Midday continues to exist without purpose. And slowly, the servant accepts that this is the purpose. Nothing breaks the quiet. Nothing demands attention. The day does not insist on being remembered. The servant moves on to the next small task, then the next, carrying midday forward without ceremony. When later hours arrive, they will do so just as quietly. For now, midday remains exactly what it is, uneventful, unimportant, calm, and perfectly suited to a rainy day in Victorian England. Midday arrives quietly, almost embarrassed to be noticed. If no one were paying attention, it might slip by unnoticed entirely. The servant senses it more than sees it. The light changes just enough to suggest that morning has given up its hold. Not brighter, not warmer, just slightly different, like a room where someone has moved a chair. The clock confirms it eventually. Its steady ticking reaches a certain point, and the hands settle into a position that suggests noon or something close to it. The servant does not celebrate this. Midday today offers nothing special. The rain continues loyal and unchanging. It does not pause for the hour. It does not acknowledge time at all. Inside the house, the air feels settled now. The fire has found its rhythm. The rooms are no longer waking up. They are simply awake, which is a less demanding state. The servant moves through familiar motions again. A cloth folded neatly. A cup rinsed and set aside. A small spill wiped before it can become someone else's problem. These tasks do not announce themselves. They wait patiently to be done. There is no lunch bell ringing dramatically. No guests arriving unexpectedly. No sense of urgency drifting down the halls. Midday has arrived alone. The servant pauses briefly in the kitchen doorway, listening. The house sounds the same as it did an hour ago and the hour before that. This consistency feels intentional, as if the house has decided not to surprise anyone today. Outside, the street remains quiet, even at this hour, when life usually stirs a little. The rain keeps things subdued. The servant catches a glimpse through the window. Nothing new. No reason to look longer. Hunger appears gently, without complaint. The servant acknowledges it, then ignores it for now. Meals happen when they happen. The body understands this arrangement, even if it does not prefer it. A loaf of bread is checked. Still there. A bit dry, but acceptable. Everything today is acceptable, nothing more. The servant pours water into a basin, washes hands carefully. The water is cold, but no colder than expected. Winter does not need reminders. Midday light presses against the windows, thin and pale. It does not push its way in. It simply rests there, waiting for permission it will not receive. Somewhere nearby, a door closes softly. Not slammed. Not rushed. Just closed. The servant does not investigate. The sound carries no importance. The rain makes the hours feel heavier, as if time itself has absorbed moisture and become slower. The servant moves accordingly without thinking about it. A small task presents itself, straightening a stack of papers that no one will read today. The servant aligns the edges carefully. The action feels oddly satisfying, even if the result goes unnoticed. Midday usually brings noise. Today, it brings a deeper quiet, the kind that settles into the bones if allowed. The servant keeps moving to avoid that. A chair is repositioned slightly closer to the wall. It will make walking through the room easier later. These small adjustments feel like accomplishments, even if no one agrees. The fire crackles once, briefly louder than before. The servant glances at it, then looks away. Fires enjoy attention, but too much can make them unpredictable. The smell of damp wool drifts in faintly, likely from coats hung nearby. The servant barely notices. Familiar smells fade quickly. Outside, the rain does something almost interesting. It slows for a few moments. Drops become thinner, more spaced out. The servant notices this and waits, curious despite themselves. Then the rain resumes its original pace, as if the pause never happened. The servant exhales softly. Expecting change was unnecessary. Midday continues without offering entertainment. The servant completes another round of checks. Door secure. Surfaces clean. Supplies untouched. Everything remains in its proper, uneventful state. A clock chimes somewhere in the house. The sound is muffled, but clear enough to count. 12. The servant does not react. Noon has been officially announced, but no one attends the announcement. The sound fades, and the house returns to its usual quiet. The servant leans briefly against the edge of the table, shifting weight from one foot to the other. Standing all morning leaves its mark. The pause is short, careful not to look like rest. Outside, a single person hurries past, head lowered, coat pulled tight. They move quickly, as if trying to outrun the weather or the day itself. The servant watches them disappear, then turns away. Midday feels like a held breath. Not tense, just suspended. The servant pours a small cup of tea, more out of habit than desire. The warmth is appreciated, even if the taste is ordinary. The cup is held carefully, fingers wrapped around it, absorbing heat slowly. No conversation accompanies the moment. Tea does not require words. After a few sips, the cup is set aside. The servant does not finish it. There is no rule saying it must be finished. The rain darkens the window again as another cloud passes. Light dims slightly. Midday looks suspiciously like morning all over again. The servant adjusts a shawl, smooths a sleeve. Clothing feels heavier today. Damp, air settling into fabric. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings faintly. Not close enough to matter. The servant does not try to identify it. Midday continues to exist without purpose. And slowly, the servant accepts that this is the purpose. Nothing breaks the quiet. Nothing demands attention. The day does not insist on being remembered. The servant moves on to the next small task, then the next, carrying midday forward without ceremony. When later hours arrive, they will do so just as quietly. For now, Midday remains exactly what it is, uneventful, unimportant, calm, and perfectly suited to a rainy day in Victorian England. Afternoon does not announce itself with confidence. It simply shows up and keeps going. The servant realizes the shift not because anything changes, but because nothing does. The rain remains steady. The light stays dull. The house continues in its slow, predictable rhythm. That sameness is the signal. Chores carry on one after another without ceremony. The servant starts with what is closest. A surface that was wiped earlier is wiped again, not because it needs it, but because this is what afternoons are for. Keeping things as they should be, even when no one is watching. The cloth moves slowly across the wood. The sound it makes is soft and dull, barely noticeable beneath the rain. The servant presses just hard enough to feel useful. A basin is emptied, then refilled. Water sloshes gently, then settles. The servant's hands dip in, cold biting briefly before fading into numb familiarity. Somewhere upstairs, a door opens and closes. Footsteps pass overhead, unhurried. The servant does not look up. Those movements are not part of today's responsibilities. The fire is checked again. It is steady, cooperative. The servant nods almost imperceptibly, then moves on. Fires that behave deserve little attention. A broom is retrieved and used lightly, more to keep dust from gathering than to remove anything obvious. The servant sweeps in careful lines, following the shape of the room. Corners are not ignored, but they are not punished either. Rain continues to press against the house, tapping and drumming with the same mild insistence. The sound seeps into every room, becoming part of the building itself. The servant pauses to listen for a moment, then resumes. Laundry is checked next. Damp clothes hang heavy, refusing to dry in this weather. The servant rearranges them slightly, spacing them out, knowing it will not make much difference. Still, the attempt feels necessary. A faint smell of wet fabric fills the air. Not unpleasant, just honest. Afternoon smells different from morning. Thicker, slower. The servant smooths a wrinkle in a table covering that will wrinkle again almost immediately. This is understood. The act is the point, not the result. Outside, the rain keeps the world at a distance. No visitors. No sudden knocks. The house feels sealed off, self-contained. A tray is prepared, then left where it is. It may be needed later. It may not. Preparation does not require certainty. The servant walks through the hallway again, steps measured, careful to avoid creaks where possible. Some boards complain anyway. The house speaks when it wants to. Afternoon, light presses against the windows. Weaker now, as if tired from trying. Shadows blur together. Lines soften. Everything looks a little unfinished, though nothing is wrong. The servant checks a list kept in memory rather than on paper. Most items have already been handled. The rest can wait. Waiting is allowed in the afternoon. Hands are dried carefully on a towel that has already been used several times. It is, but usable. Everything today is usable. The servant takes a moment to stretch shoulders, rolling them slightly to ease the H that has settled there. The movement is small, private. No one needs to see it. The rain grows background, heavy again, louder than silence, but quieter than thought. It fills gaps and smooths edges. A small repair presents itself. A loose hinge, perhaps, or a latch that sticks. The servant adjusts it just enough to make it work better. Not perfect, just better. There is satisfaction in that. The servant moves objects back to where they belong, or where they have always belonged. It is sometimes hard to tell the difference. Afternoon seems longer than morning, or perhaps the body notices it more. Muscles feel used now. Hands feel rougher. The servant accepts this without complaint. Another room is checked. Nothing out of place, nothing missing. The room is left exactly as it was found, which is the goal. The rain outside shows no sign of giving up. It has settled into itself, fully confident in its presence. The servant pours out cooled tea and rinses the cup. The cup is placed upside down to dry, though it will not dry quickly in this air. Still, it is set aside properly. A window fogs more heavily now. The servant wipes a small clear patch, looks out briefly, then lets it cloud over again. The outside remains the same. Afternoon chores continue without argument. The servant straightens a stack of linens, aligning edges carefully. This takes longer than expected. The servant does not rush. Time passes unnoticed while attention stays on small tasks. The hours do not feel empty. They feel filled with motion, even if nothing changes. The rain becomes almost comforting in its consistency. It hides the passage of time, allowing the afternoon to stretch. The servant finishes one task and moves on to the next without marking completion. There is always something else that could be done. Hands are washed again. Sleeves are rolled and unrolled. A loose thread is trimmed carefully. Outside, water continues to run along the street, finding its way where it can. Inside, the house holds steady, warm enough, dry enough. The servant pauses in the center of the room, listening again. The rain, the fire, the quiet hum of a lived in-house. Afternoon has fully arrived now. Chores continue, and the day moves forward slowly and steadily, carried by routine rather than intention. The day begins to feel heavier, though nothing has been added to it. No new tasks. No new sounds. Just time, settling in. The servant notices the weight in small ways. Steps feel slower. Movements take a little more effort. Not because the work is harder, but because the hours have been long and evenly spread, like a blanket laid too carefully. The rain continues unchanged. It no longer feels like weather happening outside. It feels like part of the house now, stitched into the walls, folded into the rooms. Afternoon drifts deeper. The servant stands at the table, hands resting briefly on the wood. The surface is cool and familiar. There is no reason to stand here. That is exactly why it happens. The fire crackles softly, steady, and dependable. It gives warmth without excitement. The servant appreciates this more than dramatic flames. Drama requires attention. The house seems quieter now, even though nothing has gone silent. Sounds are still there. The rain, the ticking clock, the faint creak of wood, but they feel farther apart, like they are spaced out intentionally. The servant exhales slowly, barely aware of it. Time has become something physical. It sits on the shoulders, presses gently against the back, settles into the legs. Not painful, just present. A task is begun and finished without being remembered. The servant wipes a surface, then cannot recall which one. It does not matter. The result exists even if the memory does not. The rain darkens the window further. Light fades into a softer gray, closer to evening than afternoon now. The servant notes this without checking the clock. The body knows. Somewhere upstairs, movement stops. Doors remain closed. The house seems to be conserving energy, preparing for later hours. The servant checks the fire again, though it does not need it. This check is not about the fire. It is about reassurance. Things are still under control. Hands feel rougher now. Skin dry from water and work. The servant rubs fingers together once, then continues. Small discomforts are acknowledged, not fixed. The kitchen feels smaller than it did earlier. Not cramped, just contained. The rain outside presses inward, making walls feel closer together. The servant passes by the window again, slower this time. The street beyond is still empty. The puddles are larger now, merging into each other without clear edges. Reflections wobble gently, then disappear. No one walks past. No one pauses. The street is fully surrendered to the weather. The servant does not linger. Looking too long invites thoughts that do not help with the work. Afternoon light slips lower, though the clouds make it hard to tell. The servant senses the shift anyway. The day is leaning toward its second half. The quiet feels thicker now. Not uncomfortable, just heavy enough to notice. A chair is moved back into place. A cloth is folded more neatly than necessary. These actions feel grounding, like pressing hands into something solid. The servant feels a brief urge to sit. It passes. Standing is simpler. Standing does not invite reflection. Rain continues its patient work outside. Inside, the house responds by holding on to warmth, onto silence, onto routine. The servant's shoulders slump slightly, then straighten. Posture is corrected out of habit, not pride. Another task is completed, other begins. The line between them blurs. The weight of the day is not dramatic. It does not press down suddenly. It accumulates quietly, minute by minute, like water soaking into fabric. The servant notices that even thoughts have slowed. Ideas drift in, then drift out without settling. Planning feels unnecessary. The rest of the day will happen whether planned or not. A clock ticks louder than before, or perhaps the servant is just more aware of it now. Each sound lands clearly, then fades. The rain shows no interest in ending. It has found its pace and intends to keep it. The servant pauses again, longer this time. Just a few seconds, long enough to feel the stillness, short enough to avoid rest. The house seems to breathe, slow and steady. Walls creak softly. Floors hold firm. Everything is doing its job. The servant feels the quiet weight of the day fully now. It is not sadness. It is not boredom. It is something in between, something calm and tired and familiar. The kind of feeling that does not ask to be solved. The servant adjusts a shawl, smooths a sleeve, and continues on. The day has not been exciting. It has not been memorable, but it has been complete so far. And as the afternoon deepens, the quiet weight remains, settled gently over everything, waiting to be carried into the evening. The light begins to fade without drama. It does not dim suddenly. It simply loses interest. Late afternoon arrives, wrapped in a thinner, duller gray, the kind of light that seems tired of trying. It presses weakly through the windows, touching surfaces without brightening them. Shadows soften and stretch, unsure where to settle. The servant notices the change while crossing the room. The floor looks different somehow, not darker exactly, just flatter, as if the day has been gently pressed between pages. Outside, the rain continues, though it feels quieter now. Not lighter, just more settled as if it has decided this is how things will be until night takes over. The servant pauses near the window again. The glass reflects more of the inside than the outside now. Lamps have not been lit yet, but the room already feels closer, more inward. The street beyond the glass looks distant and faded, like a picture left out too long. Puddles no longer shine. They absorb light instead of reflecting it. Late afternoon always carries this feeling. A kind of waiting that does not know what it is waiting for. The servant moves through another small task, slower now. A cloth is folded. A chair is nudged back into place. These actions feel heavier than they did earlier. Even though nothing has changed, the fire's glow becomes more noticeable as the light fades. It does not brighten the room much, but it gives the space a center, something warm to exist around. The servant adjusts the fire slightly, careful not to wake it too much. Flames respond briefly, then settle again, content to glow rather than burn loudly. Hands feel colder now. The servant rubs them together once, then warms them near the hearth for just a moment, not long enough to be considered rest. The dull light makes everything feel quieter, even sounds. The rain, the clock, the occasional creak of wood, all of it seems wrapped in cloth, softened and slowed. The servant passes through the hallway. The walls look closer in this light. Corners blend together. Doorways feel deeper, darker, more private. Late afternoon does not invite movement. It encourages stillness. The servant resists this gently, continuing to move, to adjust, to straighten. Outside, no one walks by. The street has fully given up on activity. Shops remain closed. Windows stay dark. Everyone has chosen indoors. The servant glances at the clock. The hands have moved, though it does not feel like they should have. Time behaves strangely in this light. A faint smell of smoke and damp wool hangs in the air. It feels heavier now, settling lower, closer to the ground. The servant wipes the table again, slower than before. The cloth leaves faint marks that quickly disappear. Nothing stays visible for long. The dull light makes details less important. Small flaws vanish. Rough edges soften. The world becomes more forgiving. The servant notices that the body feels tired in a different way now. Not from work, but from holding the day together, from staying upright through so many quiet hours. The rain taps gently at the window, no longer demanding attention. It feels like a background companion, always there, never speaking. Late afternoon light clings to the edges of objects, refusing to fill the space completely. It leaves much of the room in soft shadow. The servant stands still for a moment, longer than earlier pauses. The room feels calm enough to allow it. Nothing urgent waits. The fire crackles softly, almost politely. The servant listens, then turns away. Outside, the sky grows heavier, pressing down toward evening. Clouds lower slightly, though it is hard to tell where they end and the light begins. The servant straightens posture again, adjusts clothing, and resumes moving. There are still things to prepare before night arrives, even if none of them are important. Late afternoon slips forward, unmarked by events. The dull light remains, filling the house with its quiet, tired presence, and the day, worn smooth by rain and routine, continues its slow, patient journey toward evening. Evening does not arrive all at once. It makes itself known in small, careful ways. The servant notices it first in the air. The warmth from the fire feels more necessary now, less optional. Cold lingers longer on the skin when moving away from the hearth, and the servant adjusts movements without thinking, staying closer to heat whenever possible. The light outside thins further, draining what little color the day still had. Gray deepens into something closer to blue, then flattens again. The window reflects the room almost completely now. The outside world has begun to retreat. Rain continues, steady and patient. It has not grown louder, nor has it softened. It simply keeps going as if evening is none of its concern. Inside, the house begins to prepare itself, even if no one has told it to. Shadows settle more firmly into corners. Hallways grow deeper. Rooms feel more private, more contained. The servant moves through the kitchen again, checking what has already been checked many times before. The fire is steady. Supplies are in place. Nothing needs immediate attention. Still, the checking happens. Evening encourages caution. A lamp is brought closer, though it is not lit yet. It is placed where it will be needed later, set down carefully so it does not make noise. Preparation without action feels appropriate at this hour. The servant pauses near the window one last time. Outside, the street is barely visible now. Rain blurs what remains, and the sky presses low, heavy, and dark. If anyone passes, they do so unseen. The servant does not strain to look. Evening brings a shift in the house's mood. It no longer feels like a place of work. It feels like a place of holding on, holding warmth, holding quiet, holding what remains of the day. Footsteps sound louder now, even when they are not. The servant adjusts, stepping more carefully, letting heels touch down slowly. The house appreciates this consideration. The clock ticks on, more noticeable in the growing quiet. Each sound lands clearly, then fades. Time feels closer now, more aware of itself. The servant begins to gather small items left out during the day. A cloth folded and set aside, a cup rinsed and placed where it belongs. These actions feel like closing doors, even when no doors are involved. The rain makes the outside feel unreachable. Evening makes the inside feel complete. The fire is fed once more, just enough to last. Flames respond softly, stretching, then settling. The servant watches briefly, making sure it will behave through the early night. Warmth spreads slowly through the room. Not enough to erase the cold, but enough to soften it. The servant feels hunger again, stronger this time. It is acknowledged quietly. Evening meals will come later. For now, hunger is simply another signal that the day is moving on. The house grows stiller as evening approaches. No new sounds appear. No movement upstairs. The building seems to be listening, conserving itself. The servant moves into another room, checking shutters, making sure they are secured. Rain taps against them from the outside, dull and persistent. The shutters hold. Light inside fades further. Shapes lose definition. Furniture becomes suggestion rather than detail. The servant knows the layout well enough to move without trouble. A lamp is lit at last. The flame flares briefly, then settles into a small, steady glow. The room changes instantly. Shadows sharpen. Warm light pools in one place, leaving the rest in darkness. The servant adjusts the wick carefully, lowering it just enough to avoid smoke. Experience guides the hand. Lamps require respect. Evening feels heavier than afternoon, but also calmer. The day's weight shifts from movement to stillness. The rain sounds different now, not louder, but closer. Night brings sounds inward, pressing them against walls and windows. The servant sits briefly on the edge of a chair, just for a moment. Not rest exactly, just a pause long enough to feel the body's position. Standing resumes soon after. Clothing feels damp in places, heavy from the day's air. The servant smooths fabric, adjusting layers. Warmth is managed carefully, not wasted. Outside, the sky darkens further. There is no clear line between day and night. The transition is slow, blurred by clouds and rain. The servant moves through the final small tasks of daylight. Doors are checked. Lamps are positioned. Everything is put in place for the evening to unfold quietly. The house seems to relax slightly, as if relieved to no longer pretend it is daytime. The clock marks another passing moment. The servant hears it clearly, then lets it fade. Evening approaches, not with excitement, but with certainty. It will arrive, whether anyone prepares for it or not. The rain continues unchanged, as if it plans to stay through the night. The servant stands near the hearth, hands resting loosely at the sides, watching the fire glow. This moment feels like a threshold. The work of the day has not ended, but it has shifted. Daytime tasks are nearly finished. Nighttime routines wait patiently. The servant takes a quiet breath. Evening has almost arrived, and with it comes a slower pace, deeper shadows, and the promise that nothing more is expected of the day than to finally fade. The evening meal is not planned with excitement. It is planned with realism. The servant thinks about food the way one thinks about weather, something to work around, not something to celebrate. The rain outside makes the decision easier. Nothing complicated feels appropriate on a day like this. The kitchen is quieter now than it was in the afternoon. Evening silence is different, thicker, more settled. Sounds do not echo as much. They sink. The servant stands near the table, considering what is available. Bread, a bit
Darkness settles
butter,
fully
a
over
small portion
Victorian
of vegetables
England,
that
and
have
with
already
it comes
seen
a
better
different
days.
kind of quiet.
Perhaps a thin
Daytime
soup,
sounds
if there
are
is
gone.
enough
No
to justify
carts,
heating
no
it.
distant voices, no
Enough is the guiding
accidental
rule.
footsteps.
The fire is checked first. It has held its warmth well, glowing softly rather than
Outside,
burning high.
the street
The servant
is almost
adds one
invisible
small
now.
piece of coal,
Lamps glow
carefully
faintly.
placed, so it does not disturb the balance. Flames respond politely. A pot is brought out and set near the fire. Its bottom is darkened from years of use. It does not look impressive, but it works, and that is what matters. Water is poured in. The sound is gentle, controlled. Nothing splashes. Nothing is wasted. The servant begins to move more slowly now, not from tiredness alone, but because evening invites a different pace. Movements become careful, deliberate. Each action feels more noticeable. Vegetables are washed briefly. Cold water runs over them, carrying away
A cloth
dirt
is
that
used to
has
wipe
no
the
interest
table
in
once
staying.
more, even though
The
it
servant
was
trims
already
with trimming and
clean.
ignores
The
what does not.
servant knows it does not need it.
Perfection is unnecessary.
Still, the motion
A knife
feels
taps
right.
softly against the cutting surface. The sound is steady, unhurried. Pieces are cut unevenly, but no one will comment on that. Food tastes the same either way. The rain continues outside, tapping against shutters and windows. It feels closer now, as if evening has pulled it in tight around the house. The servant glances once toward the window, then back to the work. Darkness has made the outside world irrelevant. Ingredients are added to the pot. Water warms slowly.
A clock
Steam
ticks
does not
somewhere
rise
in
yet.
the house.
The servant
The
does not
sound
rush
is
it.
steady,
Rushing
patient.
food rarely improves it. Bread is sliced and set aside. Each piece is modest. No one expects more. The kitchen smells faintly of damp air, smoke, and vegetables beginning to warm. It is not inviting, but it is honest. Hunger does not ask for beauty. The servant stirs the pot slowly, once, then again after a while. The motion is calm, almost thoughtful. Even stirring feels heavier at this hour. A pinch of salt is added, measured by habit rather than taste. The servant does not sample the food yet. It will be fine. The fire crackles softly, reminding the servant that heat is being used and must be respected.
Cold from
Too
the
much,
day
and
resists,
food burns.
but not very
Too
strongly
little,
anymore.
and it never quite becomes food at all. Evening has settled fully now. The kitchen lamp casts a small circle of light, leaving corners dark. The servant moves within the light, rarely stepping beyond it. The pot begins to steam at last. A thin cloud rises and disappears quickly. The servant adjusts the pot's position slightly, satisfied. The rain sounds heavier now that everything else has gone quiet. It fills the space between movements, between thoughts. The servant feels hunger more clearly now. It is not sharp. It does not demand. It simply waits, patient and familiar. Utensils are set out. One bowl, one spoon. No extra, no decoration. The table does not need it. The servant checks the consistency of the food. Thin, but warm. Enough to fill the stomach without calling attention to itself. Bread is placed on the table. Butter is set beside it, wrapped carefully. The servant pauses, considering whether to include it, then decides, yes. The day has been long enough to justify it. The pot is moved carefully off the fire. Steam rises more clearly now, carrying warmth into the air. The servant feels it on the face for a moment, then steps back. The food is ladled into the bowl. The sound is soft and final. There is no second serving planned. The pot is covered and set aside. What remains will be saved. Tomorrow always exists, even if no one talks about it. The servant sits at the table at last. Not heavily, just enough to rest legs and allow the meal to happen. For a moment, nothing happens. The servant looks at the bowl, hands resting on the table. This pause feels necessary, a small acknowledgement that the day has reached this point.
The servant pulls their coat tighter around themselves,
not exciting,
then relaxes
not
again.
disappointing.
The fire compensates.
It does its job.
Rain.
Bread
Like
follows.
this feels
The butter
endless,
melts slightly
but
against
the
it,
servant knows
softened by
it will
warmth
stop
from the
eventually. Everything
servant
does.
notices
There
this
is no need
and almost
to rush
smiles,
its
but
conclusion.
not quite. The rain continues outside. It has been present all day, and it has no plans to stop now. Evening meals like this suit it. The servant eats slowly. There is no rush. The night is long. The work ahead will be quieter. Between bites, the servant listens. Fire, rain, the faint tick of the clock. These sounds feel closer now, more personal. The food warms the body gradually. Not enough to remove the cold entirely, but enough to push it back a little. That is all that is required. The servant finishes the bowl and rests the spoon inside it. The sound is small, contained. Nothing echoes. The table is cleared slowly.
Nothing forgotten.
Bowl rinsed. Spoon washed. Bread wrapped again. Butter returned to its place. Everything put back where it belongs. The pot is moved back near the fire.
The servant
not to
turns
heat,
down the
but to
lamp
dry.
slightly,
The servant does not
reducing
want
its
rust.
glow. Shadows
Rust
deepen.
invites trouble
The room
later.
feels smaller,
The kitchen
more
returns to its
contained.
quiet state.
Rain after
Warmer
dark
now.
wraps the house
More
in
settled.
sound. It presses in
The servant
softly from
stands for
all
a moment,
sides,
hands
creating a
resting
sense
lightly
of
on the back of
enclosure.
the chair.
The servant
The meal
feels
has not
sheltered
been memorable.
despite the cold.
It was
Before
not
leaving
meant to
the
be.
room, the
It has
servant
done what it needed to
pauses
do.
once more,
Outside,
just for a
rain
moment,
continues to press against the
listening,
house.
feeling the
Inside,
warmth,
the servant feels
acknowledging the
steadier,
day's slow
anchored by
ending.
warmth and
Outside,
routine.
rain
The
continues to
evening meal
fall
has
on a
passed
city that
without
has gone
event, and
quiet.
in a day defined by
Inside,
its
the
lack of
servant
excitement,
moves on, ready
that
for
feels
the night.
exactly right.
The rain
After the
has
evening
no
meal, the
story
rain
to tell
changes its mood.
tonight.
It
It
is
simply
still
falls,
rain, of course,
and in its
but
steady,
now it feels
uneventful
heavier,
way, it marks the
more
passing
serious,
of another ordinary
like it knows the
evening
sun
in
has officially
Victorian
given up.
England.
Darkness settles fully over Victorian England, and with it comes a different kind of quiet. Daytime sounds are gone. No carts, no distant voices, no accidental footsteps, just rain, fire, and the house breathing slowly around itself. Outside, the street is almost invisible now. Lamps glow faintly, their light blurred by falling rain. The servant notices how the drops catch the light for just a second before disappearing again. Nothing stays long enough to matter. The rain taps steadily on rooftops, gutters, and stone. It is not dramatic. No thunder, no strong wind, just persistence, the kind of rain that does not ask permission. Inside the house, the servant moves carefully. Evening tasks are lighter now, but they still exist. Small things, quiet things, the kind of work that fills time without drawing attention to itself. A cloth is used to wipe the table once more, even though it was already clean. The servant knows it does not need it. Still, the motion feels right. The fire is checked again. It has softened, glowing more than burning, enough to keep the room from becoming too cold. The servant adjusts it slightly, careful not to wake it up too much. Rain sounds louder at night, or maybe there is simply nothing left to compete with it. Each drop feels closer, as if the roof is thinner after sunset. The servant pauses near the window. Not to look out exactly, more to listen. The rain creates layers of sound, some drops sharp, others dull, depending on where they land. Roofs answer differently than streets. Wood answers differently than stone. The servant has learned this over time without ever meaning to. A clock ticks somewhere in the house. The sound is steady, patient. It does not care about rain or darkness. It will keep going regardless. The servant feels the weight of the day more clearly now. Not exhaustion, exactly, more like a gentle heaviness. A reminder that time has passed and tomorrow will arrive, whether prepared or not. The rain continues. It does not speed up. It does not slow down. It simply exists. A chair is pulled closer to the fire. The servant sits, not to rest deeply, but to pause. Sitting feels different at night. It feels allowed. The warmth from the fire reaches the servant's legs first, then slowly climbs higher. Cold from the day resists, but not very strongly anymore. Outside, water runs along the edges of the street, finding its own paths. The servant imagines it slipping into cracks, settling into places no one thinks about. Rain like this is good at finding forgotten spaces. The servant's hands rest loosely in their lap, fingers slightly stiff from work, but not painfully so. They will loosen later or tomorrow. There is no urgency. The lamp's flame flickers once, reacting to nothing obvious. The servant glances at it, then looks away. It steadies itself. The rain presses on. It has been raining all day, and still it continues, as if the entire world has decided to stay damp for a while. The servant thinks briefly of people outside. Anyone still walking would be soaked by now. Anyone who stayed indoors made the right choice. Rain after dark does not invite movement. It encourages stillness. The servant listens again. The house creaks softly as it cools. Wood adjusts. Walls settle. These sounds are familiar and strangely comforting. There is a faint smell of smoke mixed with damp air that slips in through unseen gaps. The servant breathes it in without thinking. The fire shifts slightly. A small sound. Nothing alarming. The servant does not move to fix it. It knows the fire will behave. Time stretches in the evening. Minutes feel longer, not slower, just wider. There is room for thought, even if no important thoughts appear. The servant's mind wanders briefly, not far. Just to tomorrow's weather, tomorrow's work, tomorrow's meals, all likely to be similar. This thought does not disappoint. Outside, rain hits the roof in a steady pattern. It almost sounds organized, though it clearly is not. The servant notices how shadows move gently along the walls as the fire flickers. Shapes stretch and shrink without intention. Nothing frightening. Just motion. A draft slips under the door. The servant pulls their coat tighter around themselves, then relaxes again. The fire compensates. Rain like this feels endless, but the servant knows it will stop eventually. Everything does. There is no need to rush its conclusion. The clock ticks on. Each sound clear in the quiet. The servant counts a few beats without meaning to, then stops. Silence fills the spaces between sounds. Not empty silence. Full silence. The kind that holds things. The servant stands slowly, joints responding with mild complaint. A few small tasks remain. The night must be prepared for. The fire is banked carefully, adjusted so it will last but not burn too strongly. The servant moves with practiced hands, confident but gentle. A last look around the room. Everything in place, nothing forgotten, nothing extra. The rain remains unchanged. It does not react to preparation. It does not care about routines. The servant turns down the lamp slightly, reducing its glow. Shadows deepen. The room feels smaller, more contained. Rain after dark wraps the house in sound. It presses in softly from all sides, creating a sense of enclosure. The servant feels sheltered despite the cold. Before leaving the room, the servant pauses once more. Just for a moment, listening, feeling the warmth, acknowledging the day's slow ending. Outside, rain continues to fall on a city that has gone quiet. Inside, the servant moves on, ready for the night. The rain has no story to tell tonight. It simply falls. And in its steady, uneventful way, it marks the passing of another ordinary evening in Victorian England. As the night deepens, the house begins to slow in a noticeable way, not suddenly, not dramatically, just gradually, like a long breath finally being let out. Preparing for rest does not mean stopping everything at once. It means easing things down, one small action at a time. The servant moves quietly, now footsteps softer than before, not because silence is required, but because the night seems to prefer it. Even the floorboards respond with fewer complaints, as if they understand the hour. The first task is simple, making sure nothing important has been forgotten. The servant looks over the room once more. The fire is steady, banked low. The lamp is dim but reliable. The table is clear. The floor swept earlier remains mostly clean, save for a few specks no one will ever notice. That feels good enough. The servant gathers a few personal items. Not many. There is not much to gather. A coat, a scarf worn thin from years of use. These are lifted with care folded more out of habit than necessity. The rain outside continues its steady rhythm. It has not weakened. If anything, it sounds more confident now, as if night has given it permission to stay. The servant pauses briefly near the window again. The glass is cool to the touch. Condensation clouds the view, turning the outside world into a blur of shadows and faint light. There is nothing to see anyway. Preparing for rest also means preparing the body. Hands are washed at the basin, water cold and sharp. The servant does not rush this. Cold water wakes the skin. Even as the mind grows tired, fingers are rubbed together afterward, trying to bring warmth back. It works slowly. Everything does at night. The servant straightens clothing, loosening what has been tight all day. Buttons undone. Sleeves adjusted. Nothing dramatic, just small comforts reclaimed. The room feels quieter now that movement has slowed. Sounds become clearer. The rain, the clock, the fire settling into itself. The servant takes a moment to stretch. Not in any formal way. Just a slow roll of the shoulders, a gentle bend of the neck. Muscles respond with mild resistance, then ease. The day has left its mark, but not heavily. It was uneventful, after all. A small candle is lit to replace the lamp for the final minutes of the evening. Its flame is softer, less demanding. Shadows change shape again, becoming less sharp, more forgiving. The servant carries the candle carefully, watching the flame sway slightly with each step. The movement feels soothing, predictable. In the sleeping area, the air is colder. It always is. The servant notices it immediately, drawing the coat closer again. The candle's light reveals a simple space. A narrow bed. A folded blanket. Nothing more. Preparing the bed is done without thought. The blanket is shaken once, then laid out. The mattress is adjusted slightly, more for tradition than comfort. The servant sets the candle down and looks at the bed for a moment. There is no excitement here, no anticipation, just acceptance. The rain sounds different from this part of the house, more distant, less sharp. It becomes background noise rather than presence. The servant removes boots carefully, placing them side by side. Wet soles are turned away from the bed. Small details matter, even now. Socks are hung near, but not too close to the remaining warmth from the fire. They will dry slowly, or not fully at all. Either way, tomorrow will arrive. The servant sits on the edge of the bed. The mattress dips slightly, responding to weight. It is not soft, but it is familiar. Hands rest on knees. The candle flickers gently. The servant watches the flame for a few seconds, letting thoughts drift where they want. There are not many thoughts tonight. Just impressions. The sound of rain, the warmth from earlier meals, the dull ache in tired muscles. Preparing for rest is also preparing the mind. The servant lets go of tasks not yet done. They belong to tomorrow. Tonight has no room for them. The candle is moved closer. The servant blows gently, testing the flame, then stops. Not yet. Instead, the servant reaches for the blanket and folds it back, creating space. Movements are slow, careful. Everything feels heavier now. Clothing is loosened further, not fully removed, but adjusted for sleep. Victorian nights are cold and layers are useful. The servant lies back at last. The bed creaks softly, then settles. The sound is brief, polite. The ceiling above is barely visible in the dim light. Shadows move gently as the candle flickers. Nothing demands attention. The servant pulls the blanket up, tucking it in around the shoulders. The fabric smells faintly of smoke and soap. It is not unpleasant. The rain continues outside, steady and patient. It has become part of the night, like the darkness itself. The servant exhales slowly. The body sinks into the bed, finding its position through trial and quiet adjustment. A shoulder here, a leg there. Eventually, stillness. The candle is reached for again. This time, the servant blows it out. The flame resists for a second, then disappears, leaving a thin curl of smoke. Darkness fills the room immediately, thick but not uncomfortable. The servant does not move. Without light, other senses become clearer. The sound of rain grows softer, more distant. The house's quiet breathing becomes noticeable again. The servant listens, not actively, just enough to feel surrounded by familiar sounds. Preparing for rest is complete now. There is nothing left to adjust, nothing left to check. The servant's breathing slows naturally, each breath deeper than the last. Muscles loosen without instruction. Outside, rain continues to fall on empty streets and closed doors. Inside, the servant drifts toward sleep, wrapped in warmth and routine. The day has ended exactly as it began, without importance, and that is enough. Tomorrow will arrive quietly. For now, rest takes its place gently, without announcement, settling over another ordinary night in Victorian England. Night does not arrive all at once. It settles slowly, carefully, like it is making sure everything is in the right place before staying. The servant lies still in the narrow bed, wrapped in the blanket, listening. The house sounds different now. Not active, not quiet either, just settled into itself. Rain continues outside, but it has softened slightly, or maybe the servant's ears have grown used to it. The drops no longer feel sharp or individual. They blend into a steady, comforting layer of sound. The darkness feels complete. No cracks of light slip under doors. No flicker from lamps. Just deep, even shadow. The servant's breathing evens out. In, out. Slow and steady. The body understands what time it is, even if the mind lingers a little longer. Somewhere in the house, wood shifts gently as the temperature drops. A soft creak follows, then silence again. These sounds are not alarming. They are expected. Old houses like this are never truly still. The servant adjusts slightly, pulling the blanket closer. The fabric is rough, but warm. It scratches just enough to be noticeable, then fades into the background. Rain taps against the roof in a steady pattern, not loud enough to disturb, not soft enough to disappear. It fills the space between thoughts. The servant's mind drifts without direction, not toward memories exactly, and not toward plans, just drifting like fog that has no reason to move quickly. The fire, banked low earlier, gives a faint warmth that reaches even here. It does not crackle anymore. It simply exists, glowing quietly somewhere out of sight. The servant feels the cold at the edges, fingers, toes, nose, but it does not bother them. Cold is part of life. It is familiar, manageable. Outside, the street remains empty. If anyone passes, their footsteps are swallowed by rain before they can be heard. The world feels paused, as if nothing important could possibly happen at this hour. The servant's eyelids grow heavier. Blinks become slower, longer. Eventually, eyes stay closed without effort. Thoughts begin to lose their shape. Sentences trail off halfway through. Images appear, then fade before becoming clear. Rain continues to fall. It has been falling all day, and it shows no sign of stopping just because people are asleep. The servant's body sinks further into the mattress. Muscles loosen one by one, releasing the day without needing permission. A distant sound, a drip somewhere in the house, joins the rain. It is irregular, but not annoying. Just another reminder that the building is old and used and still standing. The servant turns slightly, finding a more comfortable position. The movement is slow and instinctive. The bed creaks softly, then settles again. Silence returns. The night air feels heavier now. Thicker, as if darkness itself has weight. It presses gently against walls, furniture, and skin. The servant's breathing deepens. The space between breaths grows longer. Everything slows. Somewhere, a clock continues to tick, but it is too distant to count. Time still exists, but it has stopped asking for attention. Rain slides down gutters and along stone. Water finds its way into places no one will check until morning. It always does. The servant no longer thinks about the rain consciously. It has become part of the background, like the steady hum of existence itself. Sleep approaches quietly, not like a wave, more like a fog that thickens without notice. The servant's hands relax, fingers curling slightly. The body has accepted rest. Outside, night deepens further. The sky remains hidden behind clouds, offering no stars, no moon, just darkness and rain. The house seems to lean inward, protecting what is inside. Walls hold. Roof holds. The servant feels sheltered, even if the world beyond is damp and cold. Dreams begin to form, but softly, nothing dramatic. Just fragments, shapes, sounds, half familiar places. The servant does not chase them. There is no effort here. Sleep does not require effort. The rain grows steadier again, or perhaps the wind shifts slightly. The sound changes just enough to be noticed, then fades back into rhythm. The servant stirs once, then stills again. Comfort returns quickly. Night has fully claimed the house now. All daytime purposes have been set aside. No work waits. No expectations linger. The servant exists only as a resting body, warmed slightly by fire, wrapped in cloth, surrounded by familiar sounds. Even the rain seems gentler now, as if it understands it is no longer being observed. Time stretches thin. Minutes pass unnoticed. Hours drift by without announcement. The servant's breathing remains slow and even. The body has crossed fully into sleep. Outside, water continues to fall on rooftops, streets, and stone steps. It will still be there in the morning. It always is. Inside, the house settles deeper into itself. Every room shares the same quiet state. Nothing moves without reason. The night does not rush. It does not need to. There is nowhere it needs to be. The servant sleeps through it all, through rain, through creaks, through the slow turning of hours. Another ordinary night unfolds, unnoticed and unrecorded. No dreams worth remembering. No sounds worth waking for. Just rest. And as the rain continues to fall over Victorian England, the night holds everything gently in place, waiting patiently for morning to arrive. Morning feels like a long time ago now. So does afternoon. Even evening has slipped quietly into the past. What remains is only the end, soft and unnoticed. The servant sleeps on, unaware of time moving forward. The body rests deeply now, settled into the slow rhythm that only comes when nothing urgent is waiting. Breathing stays calm, even, reliable. Outside, the rain finally begins to thin. not stopping completely, of course. It simply grows tired like everything else has. Drops fall farther apart now, less interested in proving they exist. The house holds its shape in the darkness. Walls stand. Roof stays firm. Floors wait patiently for footsteps that will not come until morning. Everything does exactly what it is meant to do. Somewhere, water drips from an edge of stone. It lands, then lands again. The sound is dull, repetitive, almost thoughtful. The servant turns once in sleep, pulling the blanket closer without waking. Habit does not disappear just because consciousness has left the room. The fire, now little more than glowing embers, gives off the last of its warmth. It does not complain. It has done its work for the day. Night air settles into every corner. Cool, damp, familiar. The house accepts it without resistance. Outside, the street remains empty. No carts pass. No doors open. No voices travel through the dark. Victorian England rests as a whole, paused between days. Clouds hang low in the sky, still hiding everything above them. Stars remain unseen. The moon keeps its distance. Darkness feels complete, but not heavy. Time continues quietly. Minutes slip by without being counted. Hours follow, unnoticed and unbothered. The servant's dreams, if there are any, stay simple. No adventures. No strong emotions. Just vague impressions that dissolve before they can form stories. The rain fades further, becoming a faint background whisper. It no longer defines the night. It simply remains part of it. Somewhere in the distance, a clock strikes the hour. The sound is faint, softened by walls and air and sleep. It does not wake anyone. It only marks that time still exists. The servant remains still, muscles fully relaxed. The body trusts the night to pass without instruction. The house creaks once as it cools further, then settles again. Old wood adjusting. Old stone holding steady. Nothing changes. And that is the point. This day did not ask to be remembered. It did not demand attention or leave behind anything remarkable. It arrived quietly, moved slowly, and now leaves the same way. The rain, the work, the meals, the silence, all of it blends together into something soft and unimportant. Outside, dawn will eventually arrive. It always does. Gray light will return. Rain may follow or disappear. Work will begin again. But that is not now. Now is the end. The servant sleeps through it, wrapped in routine and warmth, unaware that the day has finished closing its final door. The night holds steady for a while longer, allowing rest to deepen, allowing the ordinary to remain untouched. An uneventful, rainy day in Victorian England comes to a close without ceremony. No applause. No conclusion spoken aloud, just quiet. And in that quiet, the day ends exactly as it lived, calm, unnoticed, and complete